When Michael Grant stumbled out of the Grand Canyon after vanishing for 3 years, his face was gaunt, his voice trembling, and he wouldn't stop whispering his wife's name. Evelyn. She disappeared the same night he did, but according to him, she never left. Rangers found something strange. A journal buried near the rim, filled with sketches of symbols, frantic notes about a place that folds, and one haunting line. You don't bring someone out the same. You bring a shadow and call it whole. Then came the real twist. A new photograph surfaced, taken weeks after Michael returned. Evelyn, older, smiling, standing at the edge of the canyon in light that shouldn't exist. Something happened in those depths. Something no one's been able to explain. But if Evelyn truly never came back, who took that photo? Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. When Michael Grant stumbled out of the Grand Canyon after vanishing for 3 years, his face was gaunt, his voice trembling, and he wouldn't stop whispering his wife's name. Evelyn. She disappeared the same night he did, but according to him, she never left. Rangers found something strange. A journal buried near the rim, filled with sketches of symbols, frantic notes about a place that folds, and one haunting line. You don't bring someone out the same. You bring a shadow and call it whole. Then came the real twist. A new photograph surfaced, taken weeks after Michael returned. Evelyn, older, smiling, standing at the edge of the canyon in light that shouldn't exist. Something happened in those depths. Something no one's been able to explain. But if Evelyn truly never came back, who took that photo? The air was dry that evening, the kind that stings your throat when you breathe too deep. Michael Grant adjusted the straps of his backpack, squinting into the late Arizona sun. The horizon shimmered like melted glass. Behind him, Evelyn trailed a few steps back, humming an old tune that seemed to vanish into the canyon wind. They'd been married 8 years, and according to their friends back in Oregon, they were inseparable. Michael, a reserved wildlife photographer. Evelyn, an art teacher who painted everything she saw, including him sometimes when he wasn't looking. That morning, before the hike, a man at a diner had warned them. He leaned on the counter, eyes half buried under a dusty hat. Grand Canyon ain't just rocks and air, he said, stirring his coffee. It remembers who walks too far. Michael laughed it off. Evelyn just smiled. People love ghost stories, she whispered. But we're here for the light. That line, we're here for the light, would later echo in his head for years. The trail was quiet that day. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed to avoid certain ledges. Every now and then, Michael glanced back at his wife, camera swinging from his neck. Evelyn had that look, half thrill, half peace. She said the canyon felt alive. By late afternoon, the wind picked up. You could hear it whistle through the rocks, a hollow, low tune that made the ground almost hum. Evelyn started recording, pointing her camera toward a narrow ridge below. Mike, do you hear that? He did. It wasn't wind anymore. It was lower, rhythmic, like something breathing beneath them. That night, their last night, they made camp on a ledge overlooking a stretch of shadows and red stone. Evelyn roasted marshmallows while Michael flipped through his photo roll. The stars looked unreal, thousands of them, scattered across black velvet. Imagine painting this, she whispered. I'll just take the picture, he said. She laughed. You always take. I make. He rolled his eyes. We make memories. Evelyn looked up from the fire. Her face softened. Then promise me, no matter what, you'll remember this one. The fire hissed. The canyon groaned. Somewhere deep below, that same hum grew louder, faint but constant. Michael woke in the middle of the night, cold sweat running down his back. Evelyn wasn't beside him. He found her flashlight beam flickering down a slope a few yards away. She stood at the edge, staring into what looked like a slit in the rock, a crack wide enough for a person to slip through. Evie, what are you doing? She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the darkness inside. I heard something, she said finally. Someone calling. Michael stepped closer, heart thudding. There's no one out here. But when he listened, yeah. There was something, a faint voice, echoing up from the crack. It sounded like a recording, fragmented words looping under the wind. Almost like her own voice. The next morning, park rangers found the couple's camp still warm. 2 cups of coffee, a folded map with Route D9 circled in red, and Evelyn's scarf, snagged on a branch, fluttering over the cliff's edge. For weeks, helicopters combed the ridges. Search teams crawled through ravines. Nothing. The story spread fast. The Grants vanished in plain daylight. At the diner, the same old man shook his head. "Told him," he muttered to another customer. "Told him the canyon remembers?" The waitress leaned in. "You think they fell?" The man looked up, his eyes glassy. "No," he whispered. "I think the canyon took 'em back." 3 years passed. The case went cold, but sometimes, at sunset, hikers swore they heard something between the gusts. A man's voice shouting for someone named Evelyn. When Michael woke in the hospital bed, the ceiling lights looked like distant stars swallowed by fog. He blinked slow, like someone forcing a camera shutter. His hands trembled, fingers tracing the thin sheet as if checking if it was real. Nurses moved around him with the soft efficiency of people used to broken things. He tried to speak. Words came out thin, unsure. Names landed like pebbles in a well. The first things he remembered were small. The weight of a backpack strap on his shoulder, the smell of Evelyn's shampoo, the click of her camera. Then the memory slipped. A beat of silence and something else. A corridor of rock, close and breathing, humming like an engine at low idle. The memories didn't line up. They fell like broken tiles. Detective Ramos sat across from him, a notebook untouched, eyes patient. The sheriff's badge glinted when he shifted. "Tell me what you remember, Mike," Ramos said, soft. Michael looked at his hands again, as if the answer might be written there. He made an effort, mouth working, tasting air like a man relearning breathing. "We found a crack," he said, voice gravelly. "It wasn't on the map, not really. It was a seam, like the canyon was split open and someone had peeled back a page." His eyes went distant. Evie walked in first. She smiled, like she'd found something she'd always known. "I told her to stop. I told her not to follow a sound." She looked back, but that smile, it was like she was listening to someone else. He swallowed. Then the light, it bent. Ramos asked about time. Michael shrugged, helpless. Time didn't make sense down there. "I thought we were there for an hour. Might have been a day. Maybe a minute." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I kept hearing things. Voices, like radio static. And sometimes it was my voice. Or Evelyn's. But slower, stretched. Like someone was playing us back wrong." The footage from Michael's camera arrived on a thumb drive a week later. They rolled it in a quiet room with blind eyes and careful hands. At first it was ordinary. Sun, wind, Evelyn's laughing face. Then an abrupt cut. The video shook. Michael's breathing spiked. Audible through the mic, ragged. The frame dipped into shadow. For a breathless second you could see both of them. Evelyn stepping into a slit of darkness, her figure swallowed to the waist. Michael lunged, arms blurring, calling her name until his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Then the feed stuttered out, fuzz and lines, and a 3-second image flashed. Evelyn, older, eyes hollow, mouthing something. Not words anyone recognized. A whisper of a chant. The screen flicked to static. People in the town watched the clip on loop, eyes glued, shoulders hunched. At the diner, the TV played it in the corner while coffee cooled. 2 regulars, old wives of gossip and grief, leaned in, whispering. "She looks different, like she's been living someone else's life," one muttered. The other shook her head. "Honey, that's no life. I don't know." Their voices were small, like conspiracies shared in the dark. Michael's memories came in shards after that, half frames of sound and sensation. He would recall Evelyn tracing a wet line on a rock, and then, impossibly, an orchard smell that didn't belong to the canyon at all. He remembered the taste of copper, and a laugh that belonged to a child he had never met. He saw his own hands underwater, though they'd never plunged in any lake. He heard music from nowhere, a lullaby threaded through the wind. Each recollection ended with a blank, the kind of blank that pulled at you like a missing tooth. There were moments when Michael would stop mid-sentence, eyes rolling inward, and mutter to himself fragments of Evelyn's lines, or maybe echoes. Nurses learned to leave him be then, letting him stitch his thoughts back together. He began journaling, writing details that arrived like gifts, and then vanished. Sometimes the journal pages were elegantly precise. We stepped into a seam that smelled like rain and old paper. Other times his handwriting collapsed into slanted scratches that even he could not read. Friends called. Some were forgiving, stumbling over how to comfort a man whose reality had twisted. Others whispered, pointed, made the cruel calculus of grief. Did he hurt her? Had something snapped? In the grocery line, a teenage cashier, the kind who believed nothing longer than a TikTok beat, snickered to her friend about that dude who came back. Her friend's laughter cracked like dry wood. Michael overheard, shoulders folding in on themselves, but he did not react. He learned the new etiquette of being a public miracle, to be watched, to be measured. There were nights when he stood at a window in his sister's house and listened for the canyon in the wind, as if he could call it back. He'd whisper Evelyn's nicknames into the dark, and sometimes, in the space between breaths, he was sure he heard a return. A syllable, too soft to be secret, but present like a footprint on his skin. He would turn to find nothing. A chair creaking, a television's hum, a clock's tick. And yet the feeling persisted. He wasn't sure whether the sound came from outside or from somewhere inside his head that had been rearranged. Ramos kept asking the same question. Did you see anyone else? Any markings? Anything? Michael would try to answer, but the answer dissolved mid-word. The seam had a sound, yes, but what made the sound? A machine? A cave? A throat? He could not say. All he could provide was testimony that felt like a confession. Evelyn had gone deeper, and when she did, something in her changed. Not by age alone, but by shape. She kept speaking to him in languages he didn't know, or in repetitions that looped until they didn't mean anything. The town had its theories, as towns do. Some believed in hollow spirits, old secrets fed by tourists and hijinks. Others whispered of mining tunnels, illegal traps of men who used the canyon for dangerous work. One man, sober with conviction, insisted they'd stumbled into a drug den. Another, with hands like river stones, swore he'd seen lights below that looked like city windows. Theories stacked up like cheap plates, but the footage held. And at night, when Michael slept, fragments stitched themselves into dreams that were not his. Evelyn standing in a doorway that opened into a room filled with photographs, each one moving, each one alive. She turned to him, eyes glassy, then smiled and said, "It's different now." He woke, reaching for her, only to find the mattress cold and empty. Michael's recollections were not linear, they were weather. Sometimes a storm of clarity would sweep through, a scent, a line, a name, and he would scribble frantic notes, fingers raw. At other times, nothing at all. He oscillated between certainty and vertigo, between the guilty relief of having returned and the shame of being the only one to remember half the story. And always, beneath everything, a humming, low, insistent, like a throat that will not close. The following week, the sheriff's department arranged a return. Michael insisted. He said the only way to make sense of what happened was to see it again. The request unsettled everyone. The police, the locals, even the park guides who had spent their lives in that desert. Still, a team of 4 accompanied him back to the Grand Canyon. The drive was long and quiet. The canyon stretched before them like a scar that refused to heal. Michael kept staring out the window, watching the layers of red stone slide past. "It's different," he murmured. "It doesn't sound the same anymore." Detective Ramos gave a quick look to the ranger beside him. "Sound?" Michael nodded slowly. "You'll hear it. The hum. It's weaker now, like it's tired." They reached the site near dusk. The air felt heavier here. Still, but charged, like before a storm. Michael pointed toward a ledge, halfway down the path. "That's where we camped," he said, his voice thinning. Cameras rolled. The team took photos, logged positions, checked old markers. Everything matched the map perfectly, except the crack. It wasn't there. Michael stood frozen, staring at the spot where he remembered Evelyn's flashlight beam had vanished. "No," he muttered. "It was right here. This is the spot." "I swear," Ramos sighed, motioning to the team. "We'll search a few meters out. Maybe erosion." "No." Michael's tone cut through the air. "It doesn't move. "We do." As the light fell, shadows lengthened across the canyon walls. The sun dipped, painting the cliffs in blood orange and black. Michael wandered from the group, tracing his hand across the cold surface of the rock. He whispered something. Not to the rangers, not to himself, but to the stone. It almost sounded like an apology. Behind him, one of the rangers murmured, "Man's talking to rocks now." The other gave a nervous chuckle. If I saw what he saw, I'd talk to anything that'd listen. Ramos shot them both a look, sharp and quiet. Cut it. They spent hours scanning. Nothing. Just the canyon, breathing in the dark. At 9:42 p.m., a strange wind rushed through the valley. It wasn't strong, but it carried a sound. A faint vibration, like a chord struck far below the surface. Michael turned slowly toward it, eyes wide. "You hear that?" They did. All of them. A low hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. Ramos's radio crackled. Static. Then a voice whispering through. "Evelyn." The ranger yanked it off his belt, startled. "What the hell?" Static swallowed it again. Michael's breathing grew shallow. "It's her. She's trying to talk." He stepped toward the ledge, hands trembling. "Evie, I'm here. You hear me?" No reply, only wind, and that endless hum that seemed to deepen with every heartbeat. Later that night, the team retreated to a nearby lodge. No one spoke much. The ranger who'd mocked Michael earlier now refused to look at him. Ramos tried to keep things grounded, reports, timestamps, rational thoughts. But the radio kept flickering, voices whispering beneath every transmission. In his room, Michael sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. He had this strange feeling, like the room was stretching. He leaned forward, whispering softly, "I told you I'd come back." The surveillance footage later confirmed it. He was talking to someone who wasn't there. At first, just whispers. Then, a movement, a figure, faint but visible, standing behind him in the mirror. It looked like a woman. The outline was indistinct. Blurred, but graceful. Still, her reflection didn't move when Michael did. The next morning, when staff entered his room, Michael was gone. The bed untouched. Window open. Outside, on the dirt near the ledge, there were bare footprints leading toward the edge, but none returning. When investigators reviewed the footage again, something strange appeared in the final frame. The mirror behind Michael's bed. Two figures, both facing the camera, and both smiling. The town went quiet after that. People whispered at the diner again. The waitress said she'd seen Evelyn's reflection once, in the back mirror near the coffee pots. Just a flicker. The old man from before muttered, "He went back for her." The canyon doesn't give back what it claims, not twice. At sunset, tourists sometimes stopped at the viewpoint where Michael once stood. They said the wind felt different there, slower, denser, almost like it carried breath. Some even claimed they could hear laughter echoing faintly across the gorge. A woman's and a man's, blending together like two halves of one story the world was never meant to hear. They found Michael's journal tucked inside a hollow of a wind-worn juniper, not far from the rim where his footprints stopped. A hiker on an evening run spotted the faded leather and handed it to the ranger with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The pages were full of neat, then frantic, then collapsing handwriting. The kind of handwriting grief and fear give you when your chest is too small for your lungs. Detective Ramos read it in a quiet room, the way people read wills. Each line folded into the next until the paper felt like skin. The entries started ordinary, notes on routes, reminders to tighten a strap, and then they shifted, like a voice lowering into a different register. Day unknown. Evie found the seam. Said it sang her name. I told her not to go. She looked at me like I was a stranger. She stepped in, and the light folded. It wasn't dark, it was other. It smelled like rain I hadn't seen, and a room full of photographs moving. I thought of real life, the bills, the stupid small things. She smiled and said, "It's easier here." Ramos paused, thumb on the paper, feeling the tremor in the words. The journal grew stranger. Sketches appeared. Circles, an arch, a jagged line like a mouth. Margins held phrases, "Not gone," "We trade," "She is here and not." At the diner, conversation pooled around the journal like rain. Patrons leaned over coffee cups, noses wrinkled, voices softened into the ritual of gossip that acts like a prayer. "Maybe he lied. Maybe he made it up," someone muttered. "Or maybe," said the waitress, folding her hands, "he crawled into something none of us got right." An old woman who remembered losing a brother in a mine long ago shook her head slowly. "Places like that keep secrets," she said. "Sometimes they swap lives." Ramos kept digging, but evidence is a brittle thing. The camera footage had the same 3-second flash of Evelyn, older, eyes empty, and then static that no one could decode. The field team found a small, hand-carved stone near the juniper, polished smooth, with letters too precise for a tourist's impulse, Evelyn. No one could explain the stone's origin. Evelyn's family insisted it was hers, though none of them could say when she'd carved it. She never did carve things, yet there it was, cool and heavy, a proof that bent the rules. Friends and strangers argued about what to make of Michael's final lines. Some said the writing was the work of a damaged man trying to map madness. Others read the last pages as a confession and a key. Ramos read the final entry aloud to a small room of officers and neighbors who had come to know the canyon like an enemy. "We did not die. Not the way you imagine. We walked into a place the world folds around. A room under the rock where faces are rent into echoes. I thought I could pull Evie out. I thought I could carry her back. But you don't bring someone out the same. You bring a shadow and call it whole. She stayed, or she left, or she split. I don't have the words. If you hear us call it dusk, know it's neither answer nor plea. It's what we trade so the canyon will let us be." Those lines landed like cold rain. The room went quiet, the sort of silence that holds weight. Someone cleared their throat. The human sound of trying to move on after a miracle has been fractured into a mystery. In the weeks that followed, small things kept arriving. Hikers reported finding little paintings on ledges, watercolor scraps of a canyon at twilight, done in a hand that matched Evelyn's style, yet older, as if painted by someone who had lived decades in a handful of nights. A camper found a voice memo on a discarded recorder. Evelyn's laugh, slowed, then layered, then woven with another voice. Michael's saying "stay," in a tone that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. People began to speak of the Grants differently. They stopped calling Michael the man who came back, and started saying, more quietly, the one who traded. Sympathy shifted into something like reverence. A candlelit vigil formed at the rim one November evening, a small crowd watching the canyon breathe. They read from the journal, lit matches, and listened. And then, as if the story had finally finished gathering its shadows, something else happened. Small, private, but irrevocable. Michael's sister, who'd flown in from Oregon and had spent those 3 years keeping his life from folding into rumor, brought everything he'd left behind: camera, a sweater, an old necklace Evelyn used to wear. She laid them on a table at the community center and asked the town to choose what to do. Most wanted the items archived, kept safe. A few wanted them burned, to stop the canyon's hunger. They decided to leave the camera in a small wooden box with a plaque that read nothing more than their names. The camera never played again on police equipment. When they tried, the footage stuttered into the same static that had haunted them all. But a neighbor, a woodworker with calloused hands, took the box home and, late that night, placed it on his porch. He said he wanted the people to remember not just the horror, but the life. The light they'd come for. Weeks later, the woodworker found the box open, camera missing, the plaque turned inward. On the porch table where the camera had been lay a single photograph. Evelyn, captured in a soft, impossible light, smiling in a way that matched no memory anyone had. On the back, in Michael's looping hand, 3 words: "I kept her." No one could prove what that meant. Did he mean he'd carried a piece of her out? A shard of soul? Did he mean he'd left part of himself with her so she could keep breathing? The canyon would not explain. It never did. Years passed. The Grant story became one of those local legends that people tell at dusk, the way you tell a ghost story to make your camping fire feel smaller and safer. But for those who had known them, for the friends who had sat with Michael while his memories fractured, the tale did something more. It altered the way they listened to the wind. Sometimes tourists still hear 2 voices at sunset, braided through the hum. A woman's note, a man's reply. Sometimes the park ranger on duty will pause, close his eyes, and tilt his head as if hearing a song only he can make sense of. He won't say what it sounds like. He will only tell you when you ask. The canyon keeps its own time. It doesn't return things the way we expect. It trades. And trades change the ledger. So the canyon remains deep, patient, indifferent, humming. People go on with their lives. Paintings are hung in galleries. A bench is named after Evelyn near a quiet outlook, where you can sit and watch the colors bleed at dusk and imagine the light they went for. Michael's journal is kept in a drawer at the sheriff's office, a thin proof that sometimes the world folds and does not unfold again. If you ever find yourself standing at the rim, when the sun slides down and the wind bends like a hand, listen. Not for answers, the canyon doesn't give those, but for the shape of things, for a voice that might be two, and for the soft trade of memory and love that keeps humming beneath the rocks. And if you hear your name carried back to you, speak softly. The canyon listens, and sometimes it answers. What do you think really happened down there? Was it grief or something that found him in the dark? Let me know what you believe happened to Evelyn. And tell me, if your loved one vanished for 3 years and came back different, would you still let them in?